The man's hands burned from substrate affixer and ached from the torque of wrenches. Another solar wind sail had come loose. He and the child spent days realigning, then riveting. They shed their tool belts and headlamps at the supply orb portal, oxygen masks shining in the grime of oil and metal dust. The father grunted and pulled the eroded lever on the portal gate. It opened with a rusted whine. The pair floated out of the dark, eyes squinting into the fluorescence of the sanitation orb. A cloud of metal shavings and dust floated after them, filtered quickly by the vents. Only once the door closed did they remove their masks. The man used the hand rungs to rotate himself to the orb's sterilizing quadrant. The child waited for him. Perfectly aligned in the 3D space, the old man still had trouble navigating. The man pumped the gel onto the child's palms. Though able to rivet an entire support mast, the finer details of hand washing eluded the 8-year-old.
You have to really get in there,
the father said, rubbing the gel along the inside of the child's fingers.
Otherwise, you'll taste oil when we eat dinner.
The child rubbed until the gel dissolved.
Can I start the oscillator?
The father rubbed his face on the moistened wash linen.
It's dangerous.
I can be careful.
The man pushed the towel back into its aperture.
Set it to 6.
Yeah!
The child yipped. They kicked off the wall and somersaulted into a catapult float down the vessel's primary tube. 100 feet down the narrow line, they hooked an arm around the navigation pole and swung up to the kitchen orb. It would take the man another 5 minutes to glide carefully to the entrance. He had to avoid sudden exertion. After 26 years without gravity, his hips liked to drift out of socket. As he floated into the kitchen compartment, the air buzzed with the static drone of the heat oscillator. The child was at the range, wearing the apron the man made for their 6th birthday. He had repurposed a piece of torn polymer cloth from when he destroyed the captain's den 15 years back. The man painted a chimpanzee on the front. The name Number 1, hand-stitched along the top. The child named Number 1 stepped aside, proud of their work, still holding the flint striker. They hid where the oscillator burned a half moon into their forearm. The father inspected the settings.
Thank you. You did it just right. All right now. Dada's turn.
Number 1 watched the man with full eyes, mouth slightly ajar as he gathered the spatula and smearboard from their ports in the wall. He gently paced along the wall until he rotated 90 degrees to the protein farm.
Evening, everyone.
The father slapped the spatula against the metal hull of the protein hive. It gonged, then rattled like a snare drum. Number 1 giggled as the cockroaches inside clicked and hissed. The father pressed the base of the spatula to the grinder button.
Thank you for your gift,
he told the roaches.
Thank you.
Number 1 repeated. The grinder spun, sucking in a slew of miniature livestock. The blades broke the ship's only other living crew into a fine paste and secreted the protein like soft serve. The man sliced and scooped at the thick stream, dotting chunks onto the smearboard like colors on a palette. He used the hand rungs to rotate counterclockwise to the dairy vent. The father swished the spatula like a squeegee along each meter-long vent flap, back and forth without breaking the line of movement. Seconds later, he had a full spatula scoop of curdle.
Good yield today,
he said, inhaling the lactose sweetness.
I think we'll have enough left for butter tomorrow.
The child's belly growled. The father laughed and rotated back to the oscillator. He opened a drawer and removed a small pod of aromatics, which he fed into the heat oscillator.
Go gather the veggie sheets.
What's the magic word?
The child sing-songed. The man laughed.
Please go gather the veggie sheets.
The child thrust with their fingertips from the accumulation ports and sprang down the long tunnel to the photon condenser. They twisted. Down became up. The wall became the floor. Just watching the child's inversions gave the father motion sickness. The next child would be even more adapted to a life without gravity. Number 1 would design them to be, the way the man had designed number 1. He began designing the child 15 years ago, the day he destroyed the captain's lounge. He started with a spreadsheet. The man cataloged every failing of his body and his mind, bugs to fix in the next version. He analyzed the years alone aboard the ship with a direct gaze he had always avoided. He listed nights of rage and attempts at self-destruction. He thought of all the people that no longer existed. He came to a conclusion. Any child of his design would not survive. Not with him as a father. He drank a month's ration of alcohol in a night and woke up twisted among the wreckage of the captain's lounge. Floating now in the kitchen, the man felt lost. He sensed the infinity stretching ahead for this vessel. 1,000 generations would follow, parent and child, occupying this exact spot, breathing his recycled air and eating his recycled particles. He was already a ghost. The oscillator flickered and hummed. Garlic and tarragon stirred in his nostrils. The child returned.
I have the veggie sheets.
Thank you. Take a float. Dinner will be ready soon.
The child finally noticed the smell. Their mouth watered. They floated up and peered down at the heat oscillator. It was shaped like a horseshoe. Between the 2 prongs, the oscillator vibrated a 4-inch sphere of air into twirling sublimation. The father flicked the protein paste within. Flick, 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 and each chunk took orbit about the intense heat. The particles cooked, spinning and whistling like the cockroaches were still alive. The man scooped the lactose curdles in a separator mesh, twirling it to seal and compress it. Juice teardropped through the mesh, and the man blew speckles into the cooking sphere. He set the remainder aside for churning. The air sputtered and sizzled.
How much longer?
Just a little.
But I'm hungry.
The child pouted. The man used his thumbnails to tear little dotted lines down the algae sheets, perforating the membrane with holes. He pulled it gently apart until it accordioned into a net. He swiped the spatula against the spinning discs of protein. A few shot out of the heat, and the man caught them in a twist of algae, spun it with expert precision so that it rotated in the air without shifting position. The spinning mass puffed steam every few seconds. The slight char of the insect exoskeleton married the sweet tang of the dairy condensation, all embraced in the salty bite of the algae matrix.
That just needs to cool. Would you please set the table?
The man learned early the best way to get a child to eat was to make every meal an occasion. He put on music from the decades past, let the kid play with the food within reason. After they learned to use a fork, they learned to cheers with their beverage pouch. The 2 of them liked to trade bites, race each other after fugitive crumbs and droplets. They barely talked during labor. But at mealtime, the child filled every silence.
I watched a circus this morning.
On the archive player?
The father said.
No, it was in my lesson bed.
What are they teaching you about circuses?
It's not about circuses. It was my math lesson, but there was a problem about circuses.
Got it. Like a word problem.
But it didn't make any sense.
The math?
The circus.
The music switched.
Go on.
There was this man in grotesque makeup.
Grotesque is a good word.
His hair wasn't real, and his nose was round.
That's a clown.
I know that. I was just describing how weird he was.
Number 1 shook their head, like they were ready to spit.
You said you were scared of clowns.
The man frowned. 2 months back, the child helped him decompress the furthest supply orb for maintenance. He let the kid watch through the gate as he opened the airlock. Number 1 went pale as they saw debris and broken bits blast against the walls, whirl and then suck out into the black void. The child began having a recurring nightmare. The 2 of them were eating in the dining orb when the hull cracked open. Their hair blasted over their faces. Items ricocheted off the walls. Compartments ripped open. All sound disappeared. The void grabbing their feet and pulling. Every time, the father lost his grip. He floated away with the rest of the debris, smaller and smaller, until he was gone. So the man told Number 1 about his fear of clowns. He thought sharing his own phobia would help the child understand their own. He worried now that all he did was provide another torment.
I said I used to be. As a little kid, I got over it. Did the clowns scare you? We talked about this.
It didn't scare me. I know they don't exist anymore.
A piece of the man's heart panged where he left it on Earth.
So, what confused you?
You said most people were scared of clowns.
Yeah, it was a common fear.
So why was everyone laughing?
The man started to answer, then stopped. He rubbed a hand over his forehead.
Well, clowns aren't scary in the circus, because that's where a clown is supposed to be. They make sense there. That's why they're scary in other places, because they're not at the circus.
But the people were really laughing. Like, they laughed harder than when I laugh.
Well, it's easier to laugh in a crowd.
The child shook their head.
That doesn't make sense.
You know how when I feel sad, it makes you feel sad? Or when I'm angry, you get angry too?
I don't like when you're angry.
Exactly, because you can feel it. That's empathy. But it's not just you and me who have that. If you could meet another person in real life, it wouldn't matter how well you know them. You would feel what they feel, or what you thought they were feeling.
Even if I don't know them?
Even if you don't know them. That's how humans work. If you hear just one person laughing, it makes you want to laugh. And if 2,000 people are laughing...
The child pushed away from the table suddenly. They crossed their arms.
Wouldn't laugh.
Their cheeks grew red.
Not there.
Because of the clown?
No.
They looked at the man with disdain.
The people.
The man watched the child retreat inside their own mind, to a place he couldn't reach. Number 1 took a long time to accept the idea of others, even fictional characters. Every night, he and the child read the same book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. The man tried other books, but the child never made it past the first page. Every face was an intruder. strange creatures they didn't recognize, speaking in perversions of their father's voice.
No one would hurt you.
I could never know that unless I knew them, and I could never know them all. There were so many people, I couldn't see their faces.
Number 1 drifted away from the table. They tried to hold in tears by snorting and clenching their fists.
Shh, shh. How did it make you feel?
Scared.
What else?
I can't describe it.
Try. It doesn't have to make sense.
The father let the child think. Music played, but all the father heard was the child's gasps of distress.
It was like I was too little, and I kept getting smaller. Like if I was in that crowd, he could never find me.
Number 1 began to cry. The man floated forward, arms open, and the child fell into the position they took as a toddler. Their knees locked around his back, cheek to his right shoulder, tear stains going down his sleeve. He turned off the music. The man felt the failure of his designs. He thought he could save the child from the loneliness that plagued him, but he had only created another emotional time bomb, too different from his own to relate. The urge to curl into a ball like his child overwhelmed him, but duty kept him upright. He breathed slow, over loud. In, out, in, out. In the silence of the ship, punctuated only by the creak of pressurized metal, the rhythm lulled the child.
Did I ever tell you about my first concert?
The child did not respond.
I was 10 years old, just a little older than you. My dad took me to see a band called Incubus.
What's an incubus?
The child said, muffled by the sleeve.
If I remember in Greek myths, it's a ghost or a demon that, well, it was a bunch of old guys from California. That's the part that matters. You know, in their 60s, reunion tour. I can't remember any of their songs. I don't know if they were actually good. Anyway, there was a big crowd of people in the Memorial Coliseum. That was the place we saw them. Normally had hockey games. I think the circus went there too. We had seats, but I could see the people on the floor. 1,000 people all crowded together below us. Lights flashed over them, big spotlights. It was like looking at a lake. You could see waves, spread through them as people pushed their way in.
He hadn't thought about seeing that many people in a while. He missed places that no longer existed.
Anyway, the show started, and all those people, every single eye, they were all focused on the same spot. And my heart started beating so fast. You could feel this pulse of excitement just spreading through the crowd. It was like we were all on a ship. And whenever it went fast, we all felt, the pull of acceleration. And when it turned, we turned with it. Then the band came out, and I didn't care how old they were. Everyone was excited, so I was too. It was so loud. I'd never heard anything so loud. It was everywhere, overwhelming. You couldn't think your own thoughts, just the music. There was one song that really got everyone. I had never heard it, but everyone sang along. Everyone, even my dad. So I started singing it too. By the end of the song, I knew every word, and I sang with everyone else. I'd try to find it for you, but it wouldn't be the same. On a tape, the song will happen right. When it's happening live, there's all this tension. You know the notes don't have to line up this way, that they could fall apart, at any moment. And all of us, we all felt that. We were, holding our breath like we were afraid the song would never get to the part we knew. And when it came, it just poured out of us. When you can't hear your voice in the whole, when you become a part of one big voice, I can't explain it.
Try.
The child said with a sniff.
It doesn't have to make sense.
It was like I was a marshmallow in hot chocolate. I was warm, but I also felt so small. Something bigger was absorbing me. And for just a second, it was like I disappeared inside of it, where everyone else was. Like I didn't exist, but I wasn't alone.
The child nodded into his shoulder. They spoke into the fabric of his work suit.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Number 1 lifted their face from the man's chest.
Why did you destroy the captain's lounge?
Before you were born,
Yeah.
I was scared.
The child pushed away from the man. The man let them float away.
Scared of me?
I didn't say that. I was scared of making you, but not you. I was scared of the process. I thought I wouldn't do it right. I thought I'd be doing to someone else what was done to me, trapping you up here, alone.
You missed people really bad.
I did.
Then why were you scared to meet me?
It's different when a person is a stranger you helped create. Because they can't be a stranger. You gotta do what's best for them, so you have to know them. They're a stranger, but in time, you'll know every inch of them, their every sound and routine and preference and reaction. But even after all that, they're still a stranger. You'll think you know them, and then one day you'll say something so wrong. They'll look at you and you'll be embarrassed to think you ever had them figured out. But that's what makes it exciting. I was excited to keep learning who you are.
I'm still a stranger?
Sometimes, but I like that. I like that I have to keep trying.
Like a mystery you enjoy solving.
Yeah.
The child grinned then. They departed the place in their mind that the man couldn't reach. Exhausted as he was, the man savored this strange little grin. A blip from a machine he helped design, but could never fathom how it worked.
I think I would laugh at the clown.
The man exhaled slowly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
come here.
The child laid on his father's chest. The man reclined in 0G, letting his body unfurl. His fingers drifted apart, his neck elongated, the child warm against his breast. Life without gravity stirred memories he didn't even know he had. He could sense a darkness before birth, a hazy recollection of floating inside the warmth of his mother, a living world pulsing all around him. The man would not live forever. He would die and become a part of the meals and the ship and memory. And the child might miss company so much that one day they'll have a child who would never know the man. The length of those years without him, the unending journey from a dead world to a living one. It did not scare the father as it did earlier. He held the child close and breathed in their smell. There can be comfort in dissolution if you dissolve into something grand.